In late June, 70 researchers and farmers took part in a WA Livestock Research Council by invitation study tour to the UWA Research Farm in West Pingelly. On site, they were treated to a broad range of presentations that provided an insight into the extent of projects underway and the degree of collaboration between WA's livestock research community. In this episode, Kelsey from UWA talks about the development of a minimally invasive protocol to investigate physiology and welfare of the ovine fetus, forming part of a major MLA investment project.
A lot of stuff with me today. This is much more elaborate than what I was imagining, so I don't know how useful it's going to be, but it's all there. So there are two projects that I'd like to talk you through today. One of them's a little bit out there, even by my standards, so bear with me. The first is around something you've probably all heard to death over the last 2 years or so, and that's the regular or slow-release melatonin implants and twin lamb survival. Although really, we wanted to push this to look at twin lamb production and welfare outcomes, so beyond that survival period. Now, the fact that melatonin can improve sheep reproduction is certainly nothing new, and in fact, this particular topic has gained a lot of attention, particularly within Australia, over the last 2 years or so. Now, we were really interested to see whether treating twin-bearing ewes at different stages of gestation with these slow-release melatonin implants could actually improve the production outcomes of their offspring. We looked at treating at different stages, so things like early gestation, late gestation, and consistently we tend to find that that late gestation period is more effective and tends to give us greater results. Now, from a physiology perspective, we can certainly see that this hormone is having an effect. We see different vasculature between maternal-fetal communication. We see differences in how these offspring actually behave. They've got different scores of things like brown fat, for example. And we find that they actually have got things like greater immunity. In terms of production results, however, it's far more subtle. So in terms of survival, as well as marking and weaning percentages, we're looking at differences of around 7 to 8%. So quite slight. It's not a decrease, so it could be worse. It can always be worse. So nothing too incredible there. What is interesting is that when replicated across 2 commercial sites, we do see that these late gestation treated animals are heavier. In this case at Ridgefield, by between 3 to 5 kilos, which is quite a lot. But when we look at the work coming out of other countries, so Spain also works a lot with Regulin, as well as those from other sites in Australia, we tend to see that 1 to 2 kilos heavier is a pretty consistent result. Now, what's quite interesting to me, though, about this melatonin story is the fact that an intervention that we've applied in utero actually changes the way these animals produce. It could potentially change their lifetime production. And that's a really interesting concept because we don't really know a lot about management of animals during this period to actually promote that. We don't know if things like extreme climatic events, stressful handling, endocrine disruptors, melatonin, during this stage could actually change how these animals perform. And as researchers, it's a tricky one because at the moment we don't really have a way to objectively measure things like fetal physiology. We can either take that animal into an animal house environment and do very invasive measures, but we're losing all of the commercial relevance of our data. Alternatively, we take subjective measures and we don't get enough information to tell us what's going on. And so that brings me to my Out There project. We are currently developing a way to actually measure fetal physiology, not only through late gestation, but through that actual birthing process and throughout the entirety of that animal's life until it goes to the abattoir. So the data that we will get from this is immense. We're looking at things like heart rate, activity, temperature, things that can tell us about circadian rhythms and the stress response. Now, to do this, we've actually taken a procedure that is reasonably commonly done in industry, which is laparoscopic artificial insemination, and we've modified that to actually insert a biosensor into the fetal abdomen. And the size of this biosensor, for example, this is all my laparoscopic equipment, which we've been using. It's all based for sheep lap AI. So this tiny little sensor has the capacity to actually measure the physiology of that animal for its lifetime. What you can see up on the computer screen here is our initial trials of this surgery. So we're actually accessing the uterus there. I did think I would have two hands for this as well, but in a standard artificial laparoscopic insemination, we have two trocars, so two tiny 5 millimeter ports to actually access that uterus. In the current surgery, we introduce the third trocar, less violently than that, so that we can actually have measurements through to the uterus, pediatric instruments, to insert that biosensor while causing the most minimal amount of damage. So we're talking incisions that are several millimeters at most. Currently, we're using two forms of visualization. So we've got our laparoscope, which would commonly be used, but we're also using ultrasound as well. So we've got two ports of vision almost at all times to actually see where that sensor is landing. So very much in the early stages, but I think as this progresses, the questions that we can answer with this are going to be really interesting. So thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Kelsey, it's just more a comment, really. I mean, we've also got a regular on site this year with the South Australian crew, but I wouldn't underestimate your 7%, because if that's real, that's huge. I think you said subtle, but if it's 7% and 1 or 2 kilos, that's enormous. I mean, I know it's
enormous, but I think we do have to consider that these implants are quite costly at the moment, at around $6 to $7 a head.
Yep.
Just a science question, Kelsey. How does the melatonin work?
So we've got two sort of main potential mechanisms of action. We know that melatonin is a really potent antioxidant. And so those antioxidant effects are quite effective in preventing things like hypoxia, which is one of the main sort of causes where we do see that high lamb mortality in twins. We also know that it modulates vascular communication or vascularity, and we've actually seen results to support that it's doing this. It increases accessory vessels and placental hemodynamics connecting the fetus. So that extra blood flow is really important for not only transferring oxygen, but also extra nutrients as well.
So are you looking at the interaction with that and dystocia? Is dystocia interaction that's causing improvement? Or?
We did look at that. In my case, I was doing the autopsies on the lambs on one particular site, and I wasn't physically able to replicate that data across our second site. Unfortunately, there's only one of me. If I could have a second one as a research assistant, that would be brilliant. So I don't think that we have got enough numbers to support that that's the case, but a larger scale study, or in fact, as you go on with your studies, it's certainly something that's worth looking into to get a measurable outcome.
Kelsey, a quick update on the range of response in terms of lamb survival. Last year we were speculating that it seemed to be related to condition score of the ewe, perhaps. Is that firming up, or is that not the case, do you think?
I mean, we haven't seen anything particularly to show that it's the case. Obviously, we had quite different condition score between your property and this one last year, and those numbers don't really reflect that. So in the case of this particular study, we haven't seen evidence for that, no.
Overlap opportunities, synergistic relationships with human research. Do you see that as an offset maybe of this program? I mean, you're drawing in from all sorts of mammalian data, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. So this has definitely got a heavy relevance, and I actually think sheep are a really nice model for human work as well, particularly in that laparoscopic surgery and the fetal loggers. If we look at that in conjunction with the melatonin, we can certainly draw parallels to human twin pregnancies in particular. So yes, I think it's a brilliant model for that.
My interest is in the birth weight and the effect of hypoxia. You mentioned you didn't think it was to do with heavier lamb. It's a lighter lamb, survivability of lighter lamb rather, more possible than the heavier lambs. If that's so, there's a genetic capability of selection for that sort of criteria.
Yeah, we did stratify our lambs into heavier and lighter groups, I guess, to see if we could see any effect there. And we didn't in this particular case, but I agree it's certainly likely to contribute.